Yo, I'm Bob. Into Marvel, happen to be totally blind since birth, talking about Spider-Man the Animated Series, Season 2, Episode 1, also Episode 14 of the animated series as a whole. And this one is the premiere of the entire season-long Neogenic Nightmare story arc, and it is Neogenic Nightmare Chapter 1, The Insidious Six. And it aired for the first time on September 9th in 1995. Spoilers ahead if you haven't seen the episode. I'd advise you to watch it or you're going to get spoiled. That being said, jumping right in, and you were warned. So this episode was awesome when I watched it for the first time because I had seen the entirety of season 1, and this was one of the first massive supervillain team ups I had witnessed on TV. I'd seen the 60s Batman movie a couple years ago on, like, I think TNT, TBS, where you had Joker, Riddler, Penguin, Catwoman teaming up. And I was reminded of that when I saw this episode for the first time. But, I mean, I'd already seen a lot of these bad guys in their own solo episodes. So seeing these guys work together in the big Insidious Six two-parter, I still really enjoy this one. I still think it holds up. Well, I mean, I think pretty much Spider-Man and X-Men, all the episodes hold up rather well. So Spider-Man is just swinging around the city as the episode starts, and he feels a bit left out, feels a bit lonely. He's really wanting someone a little prettier than Bruce. I think Bruce is a stone gargoyle, from what I've gathered from over the years. I think that's who Bruce is. And all of a sudden, he starts losing his grip, losing his spider powers. And when I saw this for the first time, I was like, what's going on with this guy? Is he kind of overdoing it? Is he overexerting himself? I remember when Spider-Man 2 had been released on DVD when I watched it for the first time, and when I saw that incarnation of Spider-Man beginning to, suffer some of the same things, I was like, oh wow, are we going to get a mutation arc in the movies? We didn't get that, but I immediately thought of Neogenic Nightmare here. So he's losing his powers. He falls for a bit. I think he rights himself. He uses his web shooters to right himself, and he is super confused. This has never happened to him before. He's had these powers for a few years up to this point, and when he starts to lose his grip, it really scares the guy because he's gotten used to them. It's like, I would imagine having an extra sense, and then all of a sudden the extra sense kind of fritzing in and out. So he's pretty scared during the opening of the episode, and I remember being really confused when this one aired for the first time. I thought he was just tired until we get into what we get into later on. Stop. Pause space. So then we get to spend a bit of time with the Kingpin in this episode, and we are introduced to Silvermane, a few other members of this crime cartel that Fisk works with. So yeah, in season 1 we saw him doing his own thing, but he of course has to contend with other bosses throughout New York, and Silvermane is not too happy with Fisk. He thinks Fisk is going to start losing everyone money, and he tries to embarrass Wilson in front of the other crime lords. I'm not sure what he does. I think he somehow maybe manages to tie Wilson to his own chair with some kind of trap he's put into it. I don't know what in the heck's going on, but Kingpin's like, nah, you're not doing this to me, and he breaks free, and then he lets everybody know, I've got an operation going on, and Spider-Man is going to be taken care of. But I love how Fisk doesn't take Silvermane's doesn't take his threats lying down. And this kind of goes into chapter 2, because you don't slight the Kingpin without having to suffer the consequences. And with Wilson, I feel like it doesn't matter if you're 19 or 90. If you mess with him, he's going to hold a grudge, and you're going to pay for it. So I think he's probably filing some of this in the back of his mind while he starts his big Insidious Six operation. So you have Smythe talking to Chameleon in prison, telling him, "Hey, man, a helicopter's going to land in the main yard. Here's what you're going to do." And one of my favorite parts of the episode is when you have, I guess, one of the guards showing up, and he thinks that the warden has somehow locked himself in the cell. And I'm like, man, how do they hire you? You got to know that's the Chameleon in there. What are you doing letting the warden out there, guy? Did nobody tell you that the Chameleon is in that cell? I mean, it's understandable. He sees the warden, I guess, and he's like, oh man, if I don't let this guy out, it's going to be my hide. How'd he lock himself in? I don't know. I'm going to let this guy out. And then, of course, the Chameleon locks the guard in the cell. The Chameleon transforms from the warden into the guard, and then he starts letting everybody else out. Shocker, Mysterio, Scorpion, Rhino's hilarious when they open his cell. He's like, "Is it dinner time already?" And I'm like, man, geez, what do they feed you? Like, not too much, or I don't know. Rhino must like the prison food. Maybe this prison food's actually good. I don't know, but Rhino's really looking forward to eating. And then they break Dr. Octopus out. They all acquire... well, I guess the Shocker requires his gauntlets. He acquires those. And then you have Beck, who... I guess he manages to snag his fishbowl helmet and his hollow cubes. And, everyone beats feet to the helicopter. They don't really encounter too much resistance because you have Mysterio using his hollow cubes, and they all get to Crime Central, and they meet with the Kingpin. And I remember when everybody got there, and he starts calling them by name. He's like, "Welcome, Chameleon, Mysterio, Rhino, Scorpion, Shocker, Dr. Octopus, my Insidious Six." I was like, what in the heck is going on here? I thought it was one of the coolest moments thus far in Spider-Man. Because, getting to see these villains working together, getting to see them interacting with each other was just... I think it was a magical moment in terms of Spider-Man, the animated series history. And of course they don't work well together because they all have their own ideas. They all have their own schemes. And I like how they're not too keen on working together at first, but Wilson lets them know, yeah, well, when you guys tried working alone before, you wound up in prison. How far did you get then? So, everybody decided to listen to Fisk. They decide to listen to him, except Dr. Octopus. He's like, yeah, I'm a scientist. I don't want to mess with all this. I have things to build. And all Kingpin has to do is tell him, well, I can provide you with a lab. I can provide you with the best money can buy in terms of technology. And automatically does a 180. He's like, okay, oh, cool, yeah, science, a lab. All right, cool, yeah, Spider-Man won't know what hit him. Sure, buddy, I'll work for you. So you throw money and science at Dr. Octopus, and yeah, he'll work for you. So I love that bit because, Kingpin is appealing to Otto's nature as a scientist. All he has to do is mention a lab and research, money to fund whatever he wants to do. And of course, Otto's going to jump at the chance to work for the Kingpin. So now Kingpin has his Insidious Six. They defeat a robot, of course. They're made to believe that it's Spider-Man. I love how Rhino, being Rhino, he's like, well, what do you know? All this time, Spider-Man was really a robot. And you're like, no, come on, man. But I love that about Rhino, though. He's really cool in this episode. In the meantime, you have Peter heading home. And, at first he's out looking for the Insidious Six, and he starts to lose his powers again because they're back, and then they fritz out again. He heads home. He decides to lay down, but, with all that's going on with him, the changes that he's beginning to undergo, he sleeps an entire day. And that must have been really wacky because, you lay down on a I guess, a Wednesday morning, and then you wake up on a Thursday morning, and he's hilarious when he wakes up, because Aunt May's like, "Oh yeah, you slept all day yesterday and all night," and he's like, "You mean it's Thursday? I gotta go to class." I think he's eating some toast or something. He's crunching something, which I would imagine to be toast, because you hear a toaster pop up, and then he runs to Empire State University, and we find out that the Toombs Foundation is wanting to give ESU a grant, and Connors is wanting to delve further into neogenics, and this is, the manipulation of DNA. It's how Peter Parker became Spider-Man. We find out, or we rediscover. We're reminded later in the episode that he was there at Farley Stillwell's early experiment as Peter Parker, as Stillwell was using the recombinator. I think it's the recombinator, the neogenic recombinator, or something very similar to it. And that's how the spider bites him. It gets into the radioactive ray, and that of course is how Peter gets the spider bites. So yeah, he's beginning to suffer the effects of the neogenic nightmare. He doesn't even know it as the episode is commencing. He knows something's wrong with him. But yeah, you've got everybody competing in order to become Connor's research assistant. And in this episode, we are also introduced to a gentleman by the name of Michael Morbius. And this was where I first stumbled across Morbius. And I mean, I saw the movie. I saw it once. I don't really remember what happened in it, because I'm like, Spider-Man's not in this. My favorite stories involving Morbius are in the animated series, and yeah, in this episode, Morbius is a classmate of Peter's, and he's competing with Peter, wanting to get that sweet job of being Connor's research assistant. You've got Deborah Whitman there as well, and they're dissing Peter for having slept in as the episode commences. And then you have Flash Thompson showing up later and letting everybody know that Spider-Man is being framed by J. Jonah Jameson. And Jameson is, of course, thinking Spider-Man is up to no good, talking about the Spider-Man Six starting to rob banks and all that. So he's got to go stop them, and they're luring him out. It is, of course, big surprise, a trap. And we get a really short and sweet battle with the Insidious Six. I wish like crazy that there was audio description to these older episodes, but there's a lot of dialogue, so I mean, it's not that hard to figure out what's going on. I'm sure you've got Ock doing things with his tentacles, Scorpion's firing acid from his tail, you have Mysterio trying to confuse Spidey with his holocubes, and I guess Chameleon has turned himself into Spider-Man. Either that or it's Mysterio using one of his cubes to look like Spider-Man. And then, of course, Spider-Man's powers, they start going wonky again. They start fritzing again. And he has no choice but to flee. He can't, his spider strength is leaving him. He's only got his web shooters, so he has to use those. He has to think on his feet to escape. Yeah, so he has no powers as he decides to beat feet and get the heck out of there, and good for him. I mean, if I had spider powers and I was losing them, I don't know. I don't know if I'd be sticking around there either. He's not doing too hot as he's losing those powers. And then we got that scene with Kurt Connors, who Spider-Man helped in season 1. And this, of course, has positive ramifications for Peter, because now, he needs help, and Connors is, of course, remembering how Spider-Man helped him out when he had become the Lizard, and he didn't allow that to leak to the Daily Bugle, and Connors remembers what he did for him. So I love how he's doing what he can to help Spider-Man here. And this is when we find out that Spider-Man's DNA has begun to mutate. And Connors doesn't know what's going on with him, but he's like, yeah, your DNA structure has mutated. I don't know what's going on with you, but for all I know, your powers are going to be gone. And it was a really disturbing scene for me. I was like, oh, what in the heck? What is he changing into? My first thought was, of course, Spider Monster, because, I mean, he is Spider-Man, and I think I was just getting into Stephen King at the time. When I was a kid, I mean, yeah, it was like the first couple of months I was reading SK, so I was like, oh yeah, what if he turns into something? I wasn't sure, of course. I wasn't sure, but when you say mutating, and that's what I start to think of. I was like, oh, well, what the heck's going to go on here? I mean, I didn't have the whole freaking plot figured out or anything, but that's what I wanted at some point to happen in this particular season. I wasn't sure if I was going to get it. I was like, oh yeah, that would kind of be cool. So you have Scorpion following Peter Parker. He wants to head to Peter's house to figure out where Spider-Man is. He remembers having to deal with Pete in season 1. He's remembering Jameson having hired him when he was going by the name Matt Gargan. You have Doc Ock following Scorpion, and Ock decides to take over Scorpion's little plan. And when he gets to May's house, he has to come up with something on the fly. Peter hasn't gotten back yet. He's having to head back to the house on foot, of course, because he's not able to swing back. So she's worried about him. Felicia is worried about him. He was supposed to go on a date with Felicia, and that is, of course, not going as planned. She'd invited him out, and this is just another one of those instances in Spider-Man's life where he can't control what's going on. And so you have Michael showing up, and rather heroically, he kind of fends off this purse snatcher, and so he starts noticing. I mean, he started to notice Felicia earlier in the episode. So you have Morbius, who is quite taken with Felicia, and he's trying to walk her home, because I mean she's already kind of had to deal with this purse snatcher dude. So, and I didn't really think of that much of Morbius when we first met him. I did not know his significance in the comics because as I've said in so many other videos, I couldn't just go out and read them. So I was like, oh, this guy seems interesting. Why are they playing this really dramatic orchestral theme whenever he comes on screen? I was like, this guy, what are they setting up with him? Who's he gonna be? Little did I know he was gonna have a big part to play later on in season 2 in the Neogenic Nightmare. So you have Doc Ock showing up, and he's so flustered when May's asking what happened to Peter. He does this really weird thing where he's trying to come up with what to say. He's like, he actually says, he's like, Peter collapsed on the street. He doesn't really know what to say. He's like, all right, I just have to pull something out of my, And so she is, of course, terrified for her nephew's life and follows Ock to a clinic, a convenient clinic. And I love how the clinic is introduced. It's a place that Kingpin has set up to patch up his own men, and they're actually using it to lure Peter there, because they of course think that he can lead them to Spider-Man, and it's also to kind of hold Aunt May hostage, because they left him a note. Ock left him a note. Meet us here at 636, was it Battery Street or something like that. So Peter has to go in there dressed as Spider-Man. He's walking on foot because he can't swing in there. And I love how the episode ends. I think he falls through a trap door, and you have all 6 of them showing up, and they're gloating as to how easy it was to capture him. And this is one of the coolest cliffhangers I remember getting to witness for the first time. I actually taped this on cassette because I didn't have a VCR with a timer at that particular point in time. I'd get it a couple of weeks from this particular Saturday from September 9th. I wouldn't have it yet. But so yeah, he's captured. You have Chameleon turning from Aunt May into a witch, a cackling witch. And it was such a cool way to end chapter 1. And I loved the serialization that they use in season 2. This is one for the most part, one continuous story arc with Peter having to deal with a new mutation disease. He's not sure what's going on with him, and on top of that, in the first 2 episodes, a two-parter, if you will, he's got to deal with 6 of his previous enemies teaming up, and he doesn't have his powers. His aunt is held captive. He's not sure how in the heck he's going to get out of there. You have Morbius showing up. If you're a kid in the 90s and watching it for the first time, not really familiar with the comics because I don't make them in braille or on audio, you're like, what in the heck is going on here? Who's this guy? All these guys are back from season 1. This is insane. Little did I know we were going to get an X-Men crossover in just a few short weeks. I love season 2 so much. I'm already going to give it a 12 out of 10 because they really raised the bar a whole heck of a lot in season 2. We get to see Hobgoblin again a few episodes down the road. Kingpin is not done after these first 2 episodes. We get to see him go up against Silvermane. We get to see Vanessa Fisk. I'm rambling because I love this season so much. I'm going to call this a video, and I will hear you guys when we are back reviewing Neogenic Nightmare Chapter 2, Battle of the Insidious Six. I'm having a ball reviewing this show and rewatching this for the umpteenth time because, as I said about the X-Men animated series, in terms of Spider-Man, these were my comic books when I was a kid. And I absolutely love rewatching this and X-Men for the umpteenth time when it comes to reviewing this stuff. So until next time, guys, I'll hear you then. Stop taking